of attendees is rising. Welcome to everybody. This is a webinar in the organization of Project ERICA, Work Package 5 on Translation and Innovation. And this is third educational webinar in the webinar series that we are organizing. And today we have two panelists. Welcome Gilles and welcome Joanne. Who will give you their perspectives and their views on how to accelerate faster towards successful clinical trials, but also to innovative drug therapies that are approved with patients. We really do hope that all the learnings today can be used in different ERNs. And whoever is not able to join us today will be able to revisit this webinar afterwards on the ERICA website. So first, I would like to welcome our first panelist, Gilles, who is a pediatric oncologist, who is professor of oncology at University in Paris. He is currently heading the pediatric research program at Gustave Roussy Comprehensive Cancer Center in France. He is distinguished member of the ERNPaedCan, but also former president and today a board member of the SIOP Europe. He is also chair of the Accelerate, and also he is currently ITCC chair. So welcome, Gilles. We are looking forward to hearing from you today.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I will share my screen. I guess you can see it. So thank you very much for your presence. The topic of today was bridging the gap between promising preclinical data and a successful clinical trial. I would like to broaden a little bit the topic from non-clinical research to successful new pediatric drug development. So, and I would like to share with you the case of oncology, what we have been doing and where we are for the future development of these new medicines for children with cancer. And I think this is a good way maybe we can discuss how this can also be shared with everyone working on rare disease. So all started in 2006 when the European Union voted and launched a new pediatric regulation with the intention for better medicine for children in Europe, obliging companies to develop their medicines in children, and if they do, to develop a medicine for Alzheimer in children, because there is no Alzheimer disease in children. So there was this article 11 being saying that there is a waiver for development by a company if the disease or condition for which the specific medicinal product or class is intended occurs only in adult population, then the company doesn't have to develop the medicine in children. So it's very much an adult condition-driven pediatric development approach that was set up. Very early at the beginning in oncology, we said, hey guys, we are using the same drug in adults and children for different cancer, because cancer in children are different from cancer in adults, but 90% of the chemotherapy is the same. So clearly we are concerned that this regulation will miss drug. And unfortunately, this is what happened. I would like to share with you the ALK inhibition story, which illustrates the point. ALK is the ALK lymphoma kinase gene that was discovered in 1994. It is a gene which is a hallmark from anaplastic large cell lymphoma in adults and children, but found also altered in lung cancer, in inflammatory bowel disease, inflammatory myofibroblastic disease, and tumors, and in neuroblastoma. And this was a really relevant target. And the first ALK inhibitor, crizotinib, was developed by Pfizer as the first in-class ALK inhibitor. Of course, it was developed in lung cancer, because clearly lung cancer, even though only 4% of lung cancer have an ALK positive tumor, that would represent a market. And the drug was approved in the US in 2011 and in Europe in 2012 for the treatment of adult patients with ALK-positive lung cancer. But because lung cancer does not exist in children, then both in Europe and in the US, the company was waived to consider pediatric development, even though there was a strong biological rationale to anticipate that this drug would be effective in pediatric malignancies. Because of that, academic cooperative groups embark on the evaluation of this medicine. And over the years, more than 200 patients have been participating to academic clinical trial, evaluated crizotinib in anaplastic large cell lymphoma, IMTs, and neuroblastoma. And finally, in 2021 in the US and 2022 in Europe, those data was taken by the company because the results were very compelling, 80% of response rate in children with ILCL, and then approved by the FDA and by the European Medicine Agency. So you see that because it was not the same disease in adults, there has been a strong delay, which is a 10 years delay in between first authorization in adults and first authorization in children. This is why we have been calling from the beginning for mechanism of action driven drug development in children with cancer. And this is again this background that we created Accelerate, because we thought we need really to make this regulation best implemented, and we need to address all together, meaning academia, advocates, industry, and the regulators, how to identify the problem and provide some solution, with the goal to improve and accelerate new drug development for children and adolescents with cancer, a kind of patient-centric organization that looks at finding solutions to solve problems. And one of the very first topics we are working on was mechanism of action. And we had a multi-stakeholder working group working on what do we need to implement mechanism of action driven pediatric development plan. And you see this publication in 2016, where all the authors are from academia, from advocacy, from industry, regulatory bodies together, looking at what it needed. And we said we need aggregated database of pediatric biological tumor targets to figure out at once whether a new target of a new compound is relevant or not, present or not in pediatric malignancies. We need to set up a capacity to more sustainable and relevant preclinical evaluation to support the rationale for developing of medicine. And at that time, this was the very beginning of two projects, ITCCP4 in Europe and Pivot in the US. We need also to set up strategy forum. Why? Because even if we have good science, there will be too many drugs to develop in children as they are in adults. So we need to set up discussion to facilitate prioritization, again, working together. In addition, we said we need to set up molecular profiling of pediatric tumors at diagnosis and at relapse to really help for each patient the decision of which treatment would be relevant with regard to the biology of their tumor. And finally, we said we need suppression of Article 11B, the famous one I showed you before, which says no drug development in children if the condition in children is not the same in adults. So what have we been doing? First, we have been developing several precision oncology studies across Europe. I showed you one example, MAPIACT, which is an initiative, a research initiative launched in 2016, really to set up biopsy at relapse for patients with the pediatric malignancies with no curative treatments, generating molecular data from this tumor, and discussing with all experts to figure out whether or not there would be targeted agents to fit and match with this alteration that would be proposed in a clinical trial. And you can see it has been developed not only in France, but also in Italy, in Ireland, and Spain. And this was very successful, installing all exome sequencing and RNA sequencing in the clinical path of this patient. And this has been published in 2022 in Cancer Discovery, sharing the experience that yes, we can do it. We find more than 69% of patients with a actionable target, but only 10% are really corresponding to existing drugs. So we set up a process which is now implemented for all patients at relapse, generating molecular information to best define which drug would be relevant. In parallel, our colleagues in Germany developed the INFORM program that started in 2015 and published in Cancer Discovery as well, with a similar experience of molecular alteration present, but only few of them really with drug available, really generating the message. We can identify targets of drug that can really benefit to children, which are existing and developed in adults, but also we have a lot of information for potential drug development that is not yet implemented. In addition, we decided to aggregate all this data from the different programs. The one MAPIAX, the INFORM, the ITER in the Netherlands, the SMPED in the UK, the Danish program, but also the ZERO program in Australia and the PROFILE program in Canada, really to federate access to all these data, really to learn, to give access for identifying target, and also to generate science with the basic researchers. And to date, this program is ongoing, and we have more than 5,000 whole exome sequencing and RNA sequencing of tumors of patients at relapse, which is for us a very important asset in the prospect of implementing mechanism of action-driven development plan. So we did the first one and the second one. Regarding the preclinical testing, clearly there was a need really to increase the capability to generate this information. At that time, companies were trying to get access to those preclinical models. They were reaching some academic centers who have a few models, but we are not always in the capacity to generate the preclinical regulatory data as it is for supporting such a program. So in the US, the National Cancer Institute, and the CTEP, Cancer Therapy Evaluation Program, develop and implementing the PIVOT initiative, which is an academic initiative supported by the NCI for preclinical pediatric in vivo testing on preclinical models to generate meaningful information to decide whether or not a drug should be developed further. In Europe, we developed a project within the IMI2 initiative, you know, this public-private initiative in between Europe and the FPIA, really to try to solve through this public-private participation issues that companies are facing in terms of drug development. And this initiative, which is now finishing at the end of the year, we had 17 academic institutions, 10 pharmaceutical companies, and 3 CROs working together to build the capability to do preclinical testing in a systematic and comprehensive way. So what did we do? We clearly developed a new model, brand new pediatric model, patient-derived model from patient of tumor. We characterize them. We develop the preclinical testing to know what sensitive they are to the standard treatments. We discuss with regulatory bodies, and we generate all information around this tumor, which is at the moment, we have incorporated a sustainable entity as a non-for-profit commercial organization that is using 350 patient-derived xenograft model that have been fully characterized on the molecular point of view and pharmacological point of view, that is covering brain, solid tumors, and leukemia. We have a huge database of this information from the tumor in the patient and the tumor in the mice, really to help designing at best this preclinical development. We have now the public-private initiative, including academic experts, really in the implementation of the testing of this compound, and the 3 CROs are running the preclinical testing. So clearly, we build an asset with a brand new and comprehensive panel of preclinical model, really to help industry, but also academia, to generate meaningful preclinical data. And for example, we have 44 PDX's model of neuroblastoma, and we can run phase 2 preclinical study of a compound, compare maybe to another one. So we think that it is really of great value to support decision-making for a mechanism of action development plan. So we did the preclinical development and developed the assets to do so. But again, there was a need really to figure out how to prioritize, because there are much drugs that we can ever develop in children. We need to find the right one based on science, but also we need to find a way to prioritize the best one in a class of compound or among different class of compound. And we developed the Paediatric Strategy Forum in Accelerate. What is it? It is an initiative where together with all stakeholders, industry, academia, advocates, and regulators, in association and collaboration with the European Medicine Agency and participation of the Food and Drug Administration, with a very simple goal: to share information with all stakeholders, to look at science, to define the unmet needs, and to inform on ongoing pediatric drug development and find a way to really best develop a strategy to address the need of the patient. And we do so either on a disease or on a class of compounds. So it's very much a multi-stakeholder initiative to look at the disease or a class of compound, define the unmet needs, and best identify how to develop the assets developed by pharmaceutical company. We are doing next week at the European Agency the 12th such pediatric forum. And as you can see on this slide, since 2017, we have addressed several important class of compounds, alternating in Europe and in the US within the middle Zoom meeting because of the pandemic. And we had more than 200 assets that have been discussed through this meeting with more than 1,000 participants. So we believe that we built something very interesting and important to really share with everyone on a given topic and facilitate then discussion between the company and the regulatory agency to figure out which development to consider for a given asset. This is published systematically within 6 months, so you can find all this publication on the Accelerate website if you are interested. And it is fully supported by the FDA and by European agencies over the last years, and clearly in the continuous. And clearly the next forum will be again at the European Medicine Agency in Amsterdam. And we published this year the evaluation of the impact, because we said we want to show whether or not these meetings are impactful. And if you go to this publication, you will see that clearly it impacted the development of several of these compounds or class of this compound. So we succeeded in implementing the fourth proposal, which are pediatric strategy forums to facilitate prioritization. And then there was the issue of the regulation, because there was still in the US, the Pediatric Research Equity Act saying you don't develop if the disease is not the same in adults, and the one in Europe, the famous Article 11B. And the good news that in 2020, the Race for Children Act was entered into force in the US. This is part of the Pediatric Research Equity Act, modifying the implementation of this in childhood cancer, and saying requires pediatric evaluation of new molecular targets and biologics intending to treat adult cancer patients, which are directed at the molecular targets substantially relevant to the growth or progression of a pediatric cancer. This is the concept of molecular mechanism of action to drive development of medicine in children with cancer. The good news is that in April this year, the European Commission released its proposal to amend the general pharmaceutical legislation, both the regulation and the directive, which are now integrating the pediatric regulation and the orphan drug regulation. And what is extremely interesting that in Article 75 on waivers, it says 75B, there is a waiver if the disease and condition with a medical product is existing only in adult population, unless when the product is directed at a molecular target that on the basis of existing scientific data is responsible for a different disease or condition in the same therapeutic area in children than the one for which the specific medicinal product or class of medicinal products is intended in the adult population. So it means that the proposal by the Commission is really to introduce mechanism of action into the requirement for development to companies regarding their drugs in children. It is a proposal, ongoing discussion at the Parliament and the Council, but we hope very much that it will figure in the law when it is voted and implemented. But then you think that it is not limited to cancer. In the US, the RACE Act is only for cancer. In Europe, is not limited to cancer, but it is limited to the same therapeutic area. So in a nutshell, we implemented all what we thought was important to really implement a mechanism of action pediatric drug development program. And not only this, but also generating data for specific pediatric anti-cancer drug development. So in a nutshell, what has been over the last 15 years? Clearly, we had several or some anti-cancer medicine developed in adults that have been investigated and approved in children, mainly in the same cancer in adults and children. We have made major progress in understanding the pediatric cancer biology, and as you saw, we are really aggregating this large clinical biological database, which we believe will serve research and drug development in the years. And in addition, we have developed assets really to amplify biology and preclinical research to support drug discovery and drug development. So bridging the gap between more preclinical data to help the decision of which drug should be developed in children. So what is the vision of the next 15 years? We need to focus on two objectives. The first one is to develop specific pediatric anti-cancer medicine, because we do have specific biological alteration that are occurring in pediatric malignancies or not, and not in adults, or in the same disease in adults. So we need to have drug development that will be specific to this pediatric cancer target. And of course, we need to continue to improve the prioritization of the medicine developed in adults in children. And this is why the mechanism of action, we believe, will be important. And as you saw, we anticipate that there is a more favorable environment that will be set up in Europe as it has been set up in the US. So in conclusion, this is in Europe, not limited to EU. And I think there is a real work to be done all together to figure out how this new concept, mechanism of action, pediatric development, will be implemented in several therapeutic areas. How does it apply in each malignancy, in each pediatric disease? What is needed to amplify biology and preclinical research for this mechanism of action development plan, but also to serve more orphan drug development plans. So we believe that is just a start, but clearly that the regulation will help in this setting, moving from adult condition development in children to science-driven and addressing unmet medical needs development, patient-centric development in children. So I will stop here. I hope I was not too long, just to thank all people in Accelerate who have been working over the last years since 2015, really to build this capability to move the lines and to really do improve for children and adolescents with cancer, and all people in ITCC, a large network running early phase trial and basic and translational research, really building the assets I was sharing with you. So thank you very much for your attention, and we'll be pleased to address any question. Thank you.
Thank you, Gilles, very much for your presentation. We do already have one question in the question section. Once again, I will ask all the attendees, if you would like to ask a question, you can use the question section in the upper right corner, but also you can raise your hand, and I already granted everybody the possibility to unmute themselves if they would like to ask a question. So to move forward, Gilles, I will ask one question. So there is a lot of concern on MOA outside of oncology. So will it work outside of oncology? What is your opinion on that?
So clearly, this is the big question at the moment. And on one side, companies are fear that it will be a tsunami of a pediatric investigation plan asked by the company, by the European Medicine Agency. And on the other end, people don't know much about this and figure out how this will work. We believe that behind the word mechanism of action is very much generating science, knowledge to better drive the development of medicines. And this is why we strongly believe that the implementation of that should really provoke more interaction and work together between the academic experts knowing the disease, doing biological research, really with industry to figure out how best to use this information to drive the development plan. Because the issue is always there are few patients with rare disease. How we can best inform the development of new medicine, including the orphan medicine, with the biology and non-clinical research. And clearly, I shared what we developed, the new platform for preclinical, and preclinical models are important. And this is also something that each of the different therapeutic area to look where the therapeutic area is in terms of biology, knowledge, and what is available to generate more preclinical testing to support mechanism of action. But I'm convinced it will help really improve development of medicine for children and for patients with rare disease.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. We share your hopes. We have another question. We have a question in the chat. It's asked by Anton. Anton, would you like to maybe unmute yourself and ask a question? Or I can also read
Sure.
it.
No, it's fine. I don't mind. Thanks, Gilles. Really exciting.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's really nice to see how it was cross-sectoral, all the work I've done on that. Was there ever any concern around confidentiality, competitive interest, conflict of interest, working with industry, and also industry being in the same room with each other as well? That's also sometimes an issue.
Extremely interesting topic. When we set up this strategy forum, we said we want people around the table and we will share only publicly available information. So companies who are participating to a strategy forum are not asked to share any confidential information. And by simply asking them to present publicly available information, then everyone has a global picture. And it's sometimes sufficient really to best design how best to develop these medicines. So very much a strategy forum is pre-competitive. Of course, these companies are competing with their compounding adults, trying to get the market. But we tell them, hey guys, really developing in children is not so easy and there are not so many patients. Maybe it's best to try to figure out how to do best, but we don't ask them to provide confidential information, and the strategy forum are not implemented under CDA. Did I answer your question, Anton?
Perfectly. Thank you. Much appreciated.
Good. Thank you, Anton. I don't see any more questions in the chat and no more raised hands. So for now, Gilles, I will thank you once more for your presentation and apologies for the technical issues earlier. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next presenter today is Joanne Lee from Newcastle University. She's project coordinator based at the John Walton Muscular Dystrophy Research Center. She is involved in EGPRD, European Joint Project on Rare Diseases, and we are collaborating together in the work package 19, hence this collaboration with the project ERICA. She has developed so-called ACT toolkit that is featured in the Innovation Management Toolbox developed inside the EGPRD project. And the IMT, the Innovation Management Toolbox, was actually the second topic in our webinar series that we recorded last year. So you can still look it up on the ERICA website. Joanne, welcome, and we are happy to hear how this ACT has developed from the TACT model that you previously also worked on, and how can it be transferred to other rare diseases in other ERNs, and what progress has been done so far in this direction. So thank you very much for joining us today, and you are already a presenter. I hope you do have possibility to share your screen already.
I think so, but I'm going to have to do it a different way.
Yes. We see the screen already. We see the presentation. It's just not in the full mode. Perfect.
Is it in
I'm
full
hiding
mode now?
myself. Yes, the floor is yours. Everything is fine. Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, I just wanted to say thank you first to Adriana for inviting me to come and talk to you today about a resource that we have in the neuromuscular field, which is aimed at bridging the gap between promising preclinical data and successful clinical trials. And also just to talk a bit about the steps that we've taken to try and replicate this model in other rare diseases. But to start, I just want to give you some of the background about the why and the how that we set up the TREAT-NMD Advisory Committee for Therapeutics, which is also known as TACT. So in 2007, within the European Union Framework Programme 6, funding was granted to build a neuromuscular network of excellence called TREAT-NMD. And the purpose of the network was to shape the translational research environment for rare genetic neuromuscular diseases. And partners within TREAT-NMD collaborated to develop tools and resources to support clinical trial readiness, and this included TACT. Now, TACT meets twice a year to provide objective advice on the development pathway of therapeutic programs in rare neuromuscular diseases. And since its establishment in 2009, TACT has reviewed over 70 requests for advice in 13 different neuromuscular conditions. So TACT was set up to address a number of issues that affected clinical trials in neuromuscular diseases. And these included compounds moving to clinic despite non-compelling preclinical data that was not reproducible, a frequent lack of realistic development plans, poor selection of inclusion criteria and outcome measures for trials, and a lack of patient input and perspectives into research planning. But overall, it was felt that there was a lack of access to the broad range of expertise that was needed to plan the best possible clinical trials. This is why we propose this model, which is a unique resource that can help to bridge the gap between promising preclinical data and successful trials by providing independent and objective advice. An ACT is comprised of a multidisciplinary panel of experts, and it always includes patient representatives. And TACT itself works very closely with patient organizations in multiple regions across the world to ensure that review processes meet the needs of the neuromuscular community as a whole. And TACT itself has relationships with a lot of neuromuscular patient organizations, and we found that a lot of those organizations, when they're approached by researchers who are looking for funding for their programs, they advise them to come to TACT first to have a review before they would consider funding. And ACT invites requests for advice from both academia and industry. Initially, when TACT was set up, it was felt that most of the applications would come from academia, but actually that's not been the case, and we found that the majority of applications came from industry. To mark the 10th anniversary of TACT, we developed a paper, and in preparation for this paper, we sent out a questionnaire to the previous applicants to TACT to ask them about their experience and what the benefits were for them for having a TACT review. And so the common advice we had from companies, particularly large companies as well, was that the expertise that was assembled within a room was unparalleled. And they also found it particularly beneficial when they were the first company working in a particular disease area. So the structure of TACT is that it's comprised of a core committee, which includes between 10 to 12 experts who have a broad range of expertise across the drug development spectrum. It is led by a TACT chair. Each of these members are expected to attend every meeting and review each application. The only reason why they wouldn't would be if there was a conflict of interest present. There is also an extended committee, which is a large pool of experts, and they don't attend every meeting, but they may be called upon depending on the expertise needed to review a particular application. And all of this work is supported by a secretariat who arrange the meetings, and they also elicit applications for advice as well. So as I mentioned previously, the meetings are held twice a year. Prior to the COVID pandemic, they were always held in person, but during the pandemic, the meetings were moved online. We found that this worked really well, and it was also appreciated by the applicants who found that this worked well with their timelines. So now we do still like to have face-to-face meetings. These continue, but then we also offer one meeting where the review is held online. So at each meeting, up to 4 applications for advice are reviewed, and for each application, a bespoke and ad hoc panel of experts are put together to review that application. After the meeting, an extensive and comprehensive report is compiled, and this is sent to the applicant, and this report is completely confidential, and it is up to them what they choose to do with this report. We do agree with the applicant a short non-confidential summary, which goes on the TACT website, and this is just to let the community as a whole know that this review has taken place. So this image here is just to give you an idea of what the TACT panel actually looks like and some of the types of expertise that are included. So the panel includes clinicians, basic researchers, toxicologists, statisticians, and patient advocates or patients themselves attend the meeting. We also include up to between 1 to 2 places for observers, and this is for people who are interested in learning more about the model. If this was something that you were interested in, please contact me and I can put you in touch with the TACT Secretariat to see if this would be feasible. And this is just to give you an idea of what the overall process looks like. So we try to get requests for advice for each meeting at least 4 months prior. We ask those applicants if they can submit a pre-application form, and this is viewed by the TACT chair and the core committee to see if the application is at a suitable stage for review. When that is confirmed, they'll be invited to submit a full application. The pre-application is really important because this is used to select the reviewers. Then once the full application has been submitted, this will be circulated to all reviewers and they will have 2 months prior to the meeting to review that application. When the meeting is convened, up to 4 applications are reviewed and each application is allocated half a day for review. It will start with all of the review panel meeting in a room without the applicant present. They will discuss their comments, any concerns or questions that they would like to ask the applicant. The applicant is then invited to come into the review. They'll have around 10 minutes to give an introduction and talk about their application, but it's also an opportunity for them to talk about any new data that they've received prior to submitting the application. The review panel will then ask questions, and the answers to these questions will help them to compile the final report. No recommendations are given during the meeting. Once this is finished, the applicant will leave the room, and then the review panel will meet again to decide their final recommendations. A month after the meeting has taken place, a confidential report is sent to the applicant, and then they will also agree the non-confidential summary for the TACT website. And if you'd like to go to the TACT website, you can see all of the summaries for the reviews that have taken place. So whilst the reports themselves are confidential, I did want to give you some examples of the type of advice that are given during the meeting. And in 2009, a paper was produced to analyse the common types of advice that were given to applicants, particularly in the preclinical stage. So this table here shows some of the common advice that was given to applicants between 2010 and 2019. And the common areas of advice that were given include dose or administration route was not clinically relevant or appropriate, readouts or tissue choice is not relevant for the question, preclinical data do not support or unrelated to the claimed efficacy. If you'd like to view this paper, you can use the QR code which is on the screen now. So TACT is very well established and has been running for 13 years. And as I mentioned earlier, applications for advice have been reviewed in around 13 different disease areas, and most commonly in Duchenne muscular dystrophy, but we have found in recent years more applications for advice in other neuromuscular diseases such as limb-girdle muscular dystrophies, FSHD, myotonic dystrophies. And as I mentioned, the application that we received, the majority of applications do come from industry, and this ranges from large companies to small and medium enterprises as well. So that's 68% of applications from industry, and 32% is from academia. 50% of the applications received are in the preclinical stage, and 50% are in the clinical stage. So TACT continues to grow year after year, and I just wanted to show you the next meetings that are taking place. Some of these are still available and looking for applications for review as well. So whilst the model itself originated in the neuromuscular field, we feel that it is readily transferable to other rare diseases due to many shared challenges. And given the large number of rare diseases and the heterogeneity of the conditions, some degree of strategic oversight in the creation of ACT would be beneficial. And the thematic groupings upon which the ERNs are based do provide a logical framework for establishing ACT in other rare disease areas and highly specialised domains. Initially, it might be preferable that you may wish to create an ACT within a specific disease. So an example is that ERN R&D. They are currently in the process of setting up an ACT in ataxias. So we think that the multidisciplinary expert advice to optimise research can help by either steering studies along a realistic and well-informed plan to clinical trial or later phase clinical activity, or it can also encourage a change of direction or approach to avoid further failure down the line. Newcastle University is a beneficiary within the EJP-RD, and one of the goals of this project is to identify good practices and support the adoption into other communities. So with this in mind, we have developed the Advisory Committee for Therapeutics, or the ACT toolkit, and this toolkit provides step-by-step procedural advice to replicate the ACT model. And within the toolkit, we have included advice on setting up the governance structure, detailed information about the roles of the reviewer and also the roles of the applicant, because we found that it's really important to make sure that people taking these roles fully understand what is expected of them and what the process actually entails. We've also included perspectives from TACT reviewers, and they've spoken about how they approach to reviewing an application, as well as some of the common pitfalls that they look for. We've also included some advice on cost to consider and sustainability as well as ongoing funding. We've also included template documents such as the pre-application form and also the conflict of interest form as well. So the toolkit was initially created as a PDF, but it now features as a collection within the EJPRD Innovation Management Toolbox, which is a library of translational rare disease resources. And these are freely accessible to all, and you can access both the IMT and the toolkit using the QR code on the screen. So whilst we initially only had funding to create the toolkit, we really did want to support other communities who were interested in trying to set up their own ACT. So in 2021, we submitted an application for funding to the EJPRD ERN Training Workshop Fund, and we were successful in that application, and we held an online workshop which was attended by 30 experts, including representatives from 11 different ERNs. And this workshop, we provided an in-depth understanding of the ACT model and the lessons that we've learned from the neuromuscular field. And we allowed the space for those participants to explore the feasibility for creating an ACT in different disease areas. After the workshop, we sent a questionnaire to the participants, and we asked whether they expect to explore further the possibilities of establishing an ACT in a specific disease area or in an ERN grouping. And 92% of participants said yes, whilst 8% said that they weren't sure. We also asked if they would be interested to continue having discussions about establishing an ACT with us, and 12 participants said yes. So we held a number of calls, but there were 3 ERNs who were specifically interested in further exploring the possibility of establishing an ACT. So along with EPICare, Gardhart and Rare Liver, we put an application together to the EJPRD Network and Support Scheme to hold an event that would bring together their key stakeholders in their field, including patient representatives, to explore the feasibility of establishing an ACT. And within this event, we designed it so that it could provide a forum for those participants to engage with the TACT reviewers and invited experts to gain an insight into the added value that an ACT could bring in their field. We also wanted to provide them with a forum so that they could discuss the opportunities and the challenges for adopting an ACT. And on the second day of the workshop, this was dedicated to breakout sessions so that they were able to do that, because we felt that it was really important that they were able to have that opportunity to gain buy-in from their invited experts. At the end of the workshop, each ERN were asked to agree some concrete next steps that they could take to further explore establishing their own ACT. And we asked them at the end of the workshop whether they felt that this model was beneficial, and 80% said yes, while 20% said that they were unsure. From both of these workshops that we held, there were some common areas of feedback that we received, and I've just collated these from both of the workshops to show some of the potential benefits that were identified by participants. So it was felt that an ACT could reinforce the benefit of seeking drug development advice early. It could help to de-risk clinical trials and give a decent product the best chance of success. But if the foundational evidence is poor, it is better for the field for a study to fail fast. With any new resource or tool, there is always going to be challenges. So these were some of the challenges that were identified by participants. And this included funding and sustainability. We've tried to address this within the toolkit, and these are areas that we continually look to update. But also with anyone who would be interested in further exploring set up the model, we would be happy to try and help to identify funding opportunities as well. Something else that was raised was the need to make a new resource in a particular area visible, because the TACT model itself has been going for a long time now, and it has a lot of awareness in the field and it's very well known. So within the toolkit, we have tried to provide suggestions for promoting a new ACT and also advice on marketing as well. So the previous workshop that we held took place in September, and we're now in the stage where we're following up with those participants to see if they were able to implement the next steps that were agreed within the meeting, and also to gain some feedback about the toolkit itself, because this is something that we continuously look to update so that's beneficial to those that are using it. We are in the process of creating the report from the workshop, and we will produce an executive summary which we'll make publicly available as well. Within the workshop, it was identified that it could be beneficial to create a kind of ACT support network for those that were looking to create an ACT so that they can discuss and share their thoughts, but also to share resources as well. So initially we have set up a Teams channel to do this, and if this was something anyone was interested in, please let me know. So we've tried to do this in the first instance, but if there is the interest there and the appetite, we're looking to try and make this more formalised. There is a patient organisation based in the UK called the Tessa Jowell Brain Cancer Mission, and they've already used the toolkit, and we've supported them whilst they have done this, and they will have their first ACT meeting taking place in November. And as I mentioned earlier, ERN R&D are currently trying to set up an ACT in ataxias, and we continue to have discussions with them and try and answer any questions they have about the setup. We also continue to promote the toolkit and have discussions with anyone who is interested in establishing their own ACT, and if this is something that would be of interest to you within your field, or you would just like to find out more information, you can contact me at the email address on the screen there. So thank you.
Thank you, Joanne, for this wonderful presentation, and congratulations, because I can see that you really are moving forward in collaborating with different ERNs and different rare disease areas. So this is really promising, and I hope that after this webinar, more ERNs will come out and reach out to you and hopefully try to establish similar ACT models with inside their networks. Once again, audience is welcome to ask questions in the question section or raise their hands. You are all able to also unmute yourself. We do have one question from the audience. I will read it. Okay, Gilles has raised his hand. Gilles, do you want to ask question?
Yes, but please ask further question by the audience. I will come after.
Okay, good. So there is a question from audience. What was the most challenging part in setting up TACT? So the first one, what was the most challenging when you started working on the TACT model?
Okay, so I wasn't actually around in the beginning of setting up the TACT, but I think one of the things we found from the people that are interested in setting up their own ACT is initially just to try and to explain the model on how it works and trying to get the kind of buy-in from the experts in the field. But once that is done and you have those key experts involved, it does make it a lot easier to kind of show that you have these people who have the expertise to help drug development programs in academia and also industry, and they're kind of well known. That helps to get applications in as well. And we also know that, like anything, it's always funding and things is difficulty, but this is something that we have tried to address within the toolkit.
Okay, now that you are mentioning experts from the field, I want to ask, what about the patients? I mean, you are mentioning that patients are also part of these discussions, but how do you manage to have their participation be meaningful? Because these are all quite technical topics. I mean, can they really participate meaningfully?
Yeah, absolutely. And it is really important that for every panel, there is always either a patient advocacy representative or a patient themselves, or both. And we do try, from a logistical perspective, if a meeting is face-to-face, we may contact a patient organisation that's local to where we're having the meeting to get a patient involved. And we always have discussions with them beforehand so that they know exactly what's expected of them. We always have a briefing before the meeting just to talk a little bit about what will happen. But within the review itself, they always try to make sure, the lead reviewer of an application will try and make sure that each expert has the opportunity to speak. And I think they've changed things over the years to make sure that actually the patient voice is first, to give their perspective, and so that they have that opportunity. And I know that this kind of review can be quite daunting, but I think even other experts in the field, they're an expert within their area, so they don't understand all of the areas. And what I've found really good to witness is how well they all work together to be able to kind of come together for a common goal.
I mean, this is great to hear. Good, thank you. Gilles, yes, back to you.
Yes, if I may. Thank you very much, Joanne. So I understood that the advice, the ACT advice, is very much delivered to one industry partner, which is exactly what we are doing in ITCC, providing to a given industry really advice on how best to develop. My question is, are you in neuromuscular disease also in a situation that you see a need for prioritization, and you are anticipating how really to address this in your initiative, where maybe more than one company participate?
So not at the moment. So for each of the meetings, we invite these applications for advice, and there's up to 4. And because of the kind of confidential nature, it's not really the opportunity to bring more than one company within a particular review.
Okay. So this is why the situation is a little bit different from oncology, where we do deliver this advice per company, but clearly the need of really make them work together and is also because maybe we have much too many drugs to address than you have, unfortunately, at the moment. Yeah, thank you.
To follow up, Gilles, on this, there was a question that came for you a bit after your presentation from audience. The question was, in your experience, is industry actively interested in developing pediatric medicines?
They have to. That's the sense of the pediatric regulation. And this is an obligation. And if they do, they get a reward. And there is a waiver concept. So that's really changed completely over the last 15 years, the issue of developing medicine for children in Europe and in the US. The question is how to improve this and make it much more fit for purpose, addressing the real needs. And this new regulation is really addressing this, not only the issue of mechanism of action, but really introducing the concept of unmet medical needs, and also really readdressing the issue of orphan drug development. But at the moment, companies are forced, or I would say obliged, to consider pediatric development now and in the future of their company.
Good, thank you. Another question from audience, this one for Joanne. What is the fee structure for TACT or ACT? What does that mean?
Sorry, the fee structure.
Yes,
for
yes.
submitting an application. Yeah,
Yeah,
so as mentioned, we do accept applications for advice from academia and industry, but the difference being that academics can submit a request for advice for free, but whereas for industry, we do ask for a fee, which will be to support the costs of running the meeting, and the fee that we ask them is based on the size of the company,
okay.
to try and make sure that it's accessible for small companies, but also we do this in a way that that academics can access this for free as well.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. No more questions, and it's already 5:05. So I will close the webinar. And thank you once more. Thank you, Gilles, and thank you, Joanne, for joining me today and giving presentations. I hope we will see each other in the future. So have a nice day to all participants. Thank you for watching this webinar. And as I mentioned, it will be recorded and requested. It will be available on the ERICA website upon request. Okay. Thank you once more.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Have a good evening.
Bye.